Hey, Chrissy here. I am a landscape architect and the owner of Kismet Design. I am a very process-driven designer, and I love sharing what I do and how I do it with anyone who's interested. Reaching your true potential and achieving your own personal goals will not happen by chance. You have to set your intentions, make a plan, and do the work. Thank you for joining me to nerd out on design. Don't forget to subscribe and to share too. Let's create something great together. This episode is my first episode for the month focus topic of balance. I welcome Cindy Funes of Garden Revelry, and we have a great conversation. I'll warn you right now, it is a long one. I was going to pop it into 2 different episodes, but the conversation was just so great, and we really kind of go back and forth on the balance of balancing family life and business, and we get into processes and systems and all kinds of stuff. And I felt like it just flowed really nicely together. So I couldn't bear to break it apart. So stay tuned and make sure to check out her website. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can see more about her and her company. And I hope you enjoy.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Just even getting the time to chat with you one-on-one via Zoom or everywhere. I mean, it's so rare. So I'm like, oh, I get Christy for an hour.
It's lovely. Well, and it was so great to run into you at the Flower and Garden Show. And I was like, I don't have enough time. Like it's nice to have the opportunity. So again, thank you. Thank you for your time to do this.
Of course.
So as we hop in, if you want to share a little bit about your business and how you entered the industry.
So my business is Garden Revelry, and that's a container gardening business that specializes in design, installation, and maintenance. And recently, in the last 2 years, we've morphed and we're doing more education, more presentations, workshops, and there's some online coursework that we're in the process of trying to produce. But Garden Revelry, for the most part, has been and continues to be this design, installation, and maintenance model, which basically entails designing container gardens, and that's our niche. We don't do anything else. Container gardens, we don't go into people's courtyards or landscapes. And we have it, usually it's an initial installation, and then we continue with those same clients year after year. We very rarely lose a client, which makes it a little tight as far as our wait list. But then we seasonally change out those containers when needed. So, and then how I got into it, like everybody else in horticulture, it wasn't a straight path. Never is, right? My background is in sales and marketing, and I was traveling a lot. It was at a time when I was just recently married and we were growing our family. And so I just wanted to make a shift in professions, and horticulture and art were kind of 2 of my passions, just growing up in a family that was passionate about both. And so I took a couple classes in graphic design and a couple classes in horticulture, and I just went hook, line, and sinker into horticulture. I met with Don Marshall. His passion and knowledge for plants is infectious. And so I was just, I was in from the get-go. And then from there, I had this great opportunity to work for the Northwest Flower and Garden Show. And so this is kind of the long version, but and I got part of my role there was working with the display garden creators and being the liaison with the convention center and helping them create these gardens within a convention center environment, and creating gardens that were kind of their vision that they had dreamed about creating and producing, but it's in this really strange environment, right? So, but through that, I met a ton of businesses in the industry and really innovative and creative designers. And so if you kind of fast forward that, in my child rearing years, I went on to have 3 kids within a 5-year period, ended up having to leave that job to focus on family. But I had made so many connections, and one of them was Tina Dixon, who was a container gardener. Her business was Plants a la carte. And so I reached out to her and said, if you ever need anybody on your crew, if you just need an extra hand, I'm in. I want to stay in the industry, but I don't have the bandwidth to have much responsibility. I need to be able to leave it at work. And so I worked under her tutelage for 4 to 5, maybe even 6 years, and learned so much from her. And then went on to launch my own business. So that's kind of how it happened. Again, it was kind of organic. It wasn't planned, but it was perfect.
Wonderful. I didn't know
Yeah.
that you worked for the Flower and Garden Show. That's
I did. I know.
really interesting.
It's so crazy. It's funny every once in a while, like I'll see Lloyd and I'm just like, oh my God, because I did what Lloyd does, but Lloyd does much more than I did. But yeah, and I think honestly, if I think back, Dwayne Kelly, who was the producer of the show at the time, and Don Marshall, and Tina Dixon, those are like the three pillars for me that of people that just put me on this path in horticulture to where I landed now. And I just feel really thankful for them. They're all great people. They were great teachers, great mentors. And yeah, I just appreciate and love all three of them, honestly, for different reasons, but really good
Well,
people.
and they all have that just infectious passion for what they do, which we all
Absolutely.
just love rubbing off on.
Absolutely. Right. And bright people, smart people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
So what prompted you to leave what you were doing and start your own business?
Yeah, so originally, like just getting into horticulture was that whole I was on the road a lot and I was raising this family. But then I had started my own container gardening business and gosh, I want to say like 2008. And then my family took a pretty big hit financially in 2008. And so the container gardening business was fairly new for me being on my own and I wasn't bringing in a ton of income. And so I was looking at other ways to bring in income. And just by chance, again, this position was available at Lake Washington as educational support assistant. So basically working with Dawn and Chris Smith, and it was part-time and it was the perfect position for me for so many reasons. Number one, because it was part-time, so it could supplement what I was already trying to kind of launch with the container gardening business. And it gave me this opportunity to get back into education and work with two people that I really admire in the industry and continue kind of learning about horticulture as I went. And again, it was just kind of perfect. And it allowed me to give back to this program that had given so much to me. So it felt kind of like I had gone full circle. And yeah, so I did that for several years, but then the container gardening business just kept growing. It started gaining traction. All the business was coming word of mouth. And it got to a point where I couldn't do both. And so I chose to dive into container gardening full time. And for several reasons. I mean, the potential for larger income growth, the flexibility um, to kind of work my own schedule. Again, I was raising 3 kids, and at that time they were more middle schoolers, teenagers, and I felt like they were going to need me less. But what I found, and I don't know if you found this, but what I
Yeah.
found was they do need you less, but when they need you, they need you. And
Yeah.
so, and you never know what that's going to be. You never know when like the shoe's going to fall off the foot or the wheel's going to fall off the car, like when they're just really stressed out or emotionally struggling with something. And so as a parent, I just wanted to be there for that. So running my own business gave me a little more flexibility and having to be in a classroom at school, and working with students and others. And yeah, I think those were probably, and then I just wanted the challenge of being an entrepreneur. My dad was an entrepreneur. I came from a family business, and so that's always been appealing to me. And so that's when I made the shift, when it just had kind of grown enough that I could, and it was financially feasible.
I think it's funny that you say that teenagers require more of your time because I joke when I was working for someone else, I had many people ask me, when are you going to start your own business? And I was like, oh, when the kids start school and that'll be easier. And it didn't make anything any easier. And now as they get older, like they need me less. They're not as dependent, but they have their own schedules that they don't work off of my schedule like they did when they were younger. Now they've got multiple sports, they've got school events, friends,
Absolutely.
all kinds of things that, it adds a whole nother layer. And it's amazing having the flexibility to be able to tune in and out of work as needed and flex with that to be there when they need me. So
Absolutely, yeah.
I
With
totally
all these
agree.
different roles, right? Like it's like, I mean, if they're not driving, yeah, they're super involved in all these activities and all the, then we basically become the shuttle car service and or the travel agent because they're just going on all these trips with their chess club or their, I mean, it just it's just
Yep.
endless, like all the different hats you're having to put on. But yeah, I do think being able to tune in and tune out and running your own business. If you're surrounded by good people or if you've structured your business so that you can do that, that's key, right?
Yeah.
Is really helpful and essential. It does give you a little more freedom if wanting. Yeah.
So speaking of that flexibility, as you flux with kind of balancing work life and business life, because currently right now, my focus month is vision, but next month when this actually airs, my focus topic is balance. And so I think especially with very very seasonal, because you do container gardening, that's very seasonal. And obviously, balancing being a mom, being an entrepreneur, and just having your own life in addition to that. What are some of the things that you've incorporated into your business to help create that balance and maybe even boundaries?
So first of all, it's a struggle, right? The word balance always to me, I was like, what is balance? Like, is it this teeter-tottering of like kind of going back and forth, or is it something that's just stable and consistent all the time? I feel like it's more kind of a teeter-totter. Um, so from a business standpoint, and this is where I think you and I really agree on, is like systems are really important. Like any system that I can incorporate in my business so that I'm not having to rethink about what I'm doing is super helpful in keeping balance in my life during the seasons of which we're installing. So because container gardening is so highly seasonal, and I have to say, I feel pretty fortunate that we're in the Pacific Northwest because as a container gardener, if you wanted to, we can get away with planting just 2 seasons. Now, those 2 seasons are like running a marathon and pretty chaotic, but you have these 2 seasons and then you have kind of these dips and these lulls following. My company, again, we do design, installation, and maintenance, and we went to a model several years ago where we wouldn't take on a client that didn't take on maintenance with us. And so that maintenance piece is helpful because it keeps the cash flow a little more consistent, keeps my employees employed throughout the seasons, even though the hours are dropping off, we're still touching, one another, and so I'm not having to rehire from season to season. And all those things help create balance in my life during the off season. And when I say off season, doesn't mean I'm not doing anything and I'm just always going on vacation, but it's just not that chaotic of planting and installing every day, a couple jobs a day, which is really extreme. Like in 2 seasons, like we'll start May, the first week of May, and we'll plant everybody, and everybody wants to be done by the third week of June. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And that's when the plant material is available. And so we're planting within a 6 to 8 week period, all of our clients. And then we drop off into this maintenance pattern, and then we won't plant them again until October. If we do our job right, we can plant again. This is here in the Pacific Northwest. Geographically, everybody can't do this because of weather patterns. And if you're in, the Midwest, you can't, the living material is not going to make it through the winter. So you're going to have to change out something. But for us, if we select our plants well for the containers, we can plant in May. and have that planting look fantastic and those plants thriving all the way through October. And then in October, we can plant and do the same thing. And we can do that, number one, by having this mix of evergreens, perennials, and annuals. So we do a lot of mixed plantings. And then in October, when we plant, we underplant with bulbs, which again, we're fortunate because we can do that here in the Pacific Northwest. So that typical time when a lot of people around the nation, other container gardeners, are having to change things out maybe this time of year, like they're just gearing, like they've started their planting season, their spring planting season now. We can kind of stretch that out because we've got bulbs blooming right now on these planters, which is offering that kind of fresh color and growth that everybody's looking for without changing out the planting. And so then we won't have to change out till May. But so those are some of the things that I do just to stretch that kind of off season out a little bit. As far as like balance in my personal life, there's just a couple of small things that I try to do. I'm not always great, but I try not to communicate via text with clients. It's always via email because I just find text just seeps in and can be kind of intrusive to my personal life. I try not to respond to emails after 7 p.m. Sometimes I'm just sitting in front of a TV and I'm like, okay, I should just do that. But even so, what I'll do is I'll maybe write that email, but not send it until the next morning, just so the clients know that I'm not available, and employees too, for that matter. I'm not available from 7 p.m. till 7 p.m. or a.m. That's like my time. Other boundaries I've set are usually around communication like that. And then other things, it's just setting up systems and efficiencies within the business so that I'm not having to think about all these things, that they're just kind of on autopilot. Yeah.
What's your favorite system that you feel like saves you the most time that you've incorporated into your business? Or
Hmm.
at least the first one that pops to mind.
Yeah, I think the first one was a big shift that we made maybe 5 or 6 years into the business, was that we we've always pre-designed, but we pre-pull by flat, by container, by client. So, and this is, I guess, goes back to actually building in maybe some balance, is that I've scheduled our work weeks so that during planting season, 4 of those days we're actually installing, like we are on site installing and planting containers. But one day a week we're not, and it's fluctuated over the years. I've kind of found Wednesday's the best day for that, but sometimes we've done it on Fridays. That's a whole nother topic, is employees and when they're available and how I work with employees. It's a little different than a lot of people, but anyways, so what we've done is we now take that day that we're not installing and we pull all the plants for the following week. And then we pull those plants and we put them in flats by client and by container, so that when next week happens, we can just go, oh, client A, that we're loading the truck. Client A, it's 16 pots, and it's like pot 1, pot 2, pot 3. So all those plants are already pulled, they're ready to go. And so when we're on site, those flats go directly to those pots, and then we're in the system of clean out, and then I follow along. So somebody will clean out, I place the plants exactly where I want them design wise, and then they're moving ahead and they're cleaning out the planters, and then my employees are circling back around and they're planting the pots. So we've got this kind of system where they're cleaning out, I'm following them, I'm placing the plants where they want it, and then they're coming back around when they're done with their pots and they're planting them. And that system alone made us so much more efficient on site. There wasn't this standing around of employees saying, what should I do? There wasn't me kind of going, where's that plant I was looking for? Wait, I know super helpful. I will say, interestingly enough, initially it was kind of eye-opening in the fact that the invoices for the clients went down, because I bill on time and materials, and we were saving a heck of a lot of time all of a sudden on site. So then I had to look at this system that we created and go, okay, how am I gonna get back to billing the same amount or billing the same amount of revenue? And is it increasing my prices because we're better at what we do? Or is it charging differently for the time that we're pulling? And, so there was some things that we had to work out. And we did, but that's probably one of the most, when you talk about systems, that's a system that was super helpful for me and my company. And then everybody knew exactly what was expected of them to. And we had this down day where we weren't planting. We were kind of just here as a group and we're chitter chattering and we're pulling plants, but it was a little bit, it just wasn't as chaotic. Not chaotic isn't the right word. It just, and stressful is not the right word. It wasn't as intense. It's not as
Yeah.
intense as being on site and actually planting. So, yeah.
How do you pull? So you said you basically pull per pot. So you've obviously got a design ahead of time and what each piece is, what each plant is going to be. How do you organize those into the different pots and what's your system look like for labeling?
So I do pre-design. And so I pre-design and actually order my inventory based on those schematics. And things get tweaked last minute, always on site, either because of availability of plants or like we get on site and even a plant, even though we do maintenance and we're there 2 weeks prior, all of a sudden the plant's covered in aphids or there's been this demise. And so there's things that definitely like, wait, it's not all on paper and design, but so is some tweaking, but for the most part, it's pre-designed. So I have this schematic that labels a planter and it'll say, 3 begonia illumination apricots. And it'll also list any existing materials. So let's say existing Fatschera angustar. And so it has this under this pot. And then there's in the comments section, it says exactly where I think the plant should go. Again, there's some tweaking because plants are bigger or smaller or whatever than we thought they were going to be. But for the most part, I have a pretty good idea. And since I'm placing the plants, I'm placing them exactly where I want, the face that I want them turned to, so filling those holes and gaps. And then my crew is coming around planting them, and they actually could do that as well. They're all so good. But yeah, so and the labeling is basically the pots or the plant, when we pull them, the plants are just going into this flat, like a nursery flat, and there's a tag that says pot 1.
Oh,
And then each label has a different color. So I know red is going to one client, green, all of those that were, in green, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are going to client B, and all those that are black so that's kind of the system. Does that answer
okay.
the question?
Yeah. I just find it very fascinating and it's very exciting how like efficient that is. It's like blowing my mind right now.
Well, you have to, right, honestly, as a container gardener, you have to be super efficient. If you want to make any money doing it, because your seasons are short and you're trying to get as many pots planted as possible in a limited amount of time. So in order to do that, you have to be efficient when you're on site and off site. You just have to be efficient in your work in order to have more growth.
So when you are on planting day for those unforeseen things where there's an existing plant that you are planning to keep, do you have like a stock of things that you're thinking, are just kind of extras that you'll load in and have ready just in case you need them?
Oh, the women that I work with they would be going, oh boy, does she. I am I am known for 2 things. One, bringing extras, because I love extras. And even sometimes when something hasn't gone south, I'll still try to get the extra in. Well, wait, that's such a cool plant. We need to get this in somehow. And shoehorning plants into a planter. And I'm always like, there's room for one more. And they're like, there's no room. Yes, there is. So yeah, so there's always extras that we bring in the same color scheme, some, shade and sun, so that we have kind of this mix in case something is quite not as we think it will be when we get on site. Yeah.
Do you have clients that stick with like the same color theme year after year, or do you like change it up? Is that something that is more client directed or something that you really, direct and decide?
Yeah, it's both. So we check in with our clients between each season. So if we were planting in the spring, in May, then we do a check-in, like a walkthrough design check-in in August to see kind of if things grew the way we thought they were going to grow, what looks great, what doesn't look great. And at that time we meet with the clients, or if the client, most of our clients at this point are kind of like, no, just do your thing. But then that would be a time where we just walk through and say, hey, what do you like? What do you not like about this? And that's the time that some of them will say, I don't love that plant, or you know what, I'm kind of tired of orange, going with this kind of orange theme in the summer. Next year, let's try this. And then we just note it for the following year. I would say most of our clients at this point, because we've just been with some people for so long, on the schematic from last year, it's just like repeat, repeat, repeat. A lot of them just kind of like what they like, and they like what we do, and they trust us. And so the designs don't necessarily change all that greatly from year to year. It's more than me as a designer and a creator being out there and going, okay, I need to create something different because it's feeling a little stale. So it's finding those new plants, or finding like the trending color or something of that nature, and incorporating those into their plantings. Yeah.
Nice. I love it. I do the same thing. Like even in my own pots, like I've got these hanging planters and I end up planting them the same way every year and I get bored with it. But then every year that I change it up, I'm like, I just really like what I had before. It looks so great. But I want something new and fresh. But sometimes you find those combinations that are just perfect for the spot.
Right. Yeah, there's one client that has this grow that I don't know what it is, but culturally, like anything you plant there just like seems to just thrive. And there was a planting that we did, oh, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And we did it like 3 years in a row. She just loved it. I was like, we got to do something different. And we did something different. And it was lovely. But she's like, I don't know. I really liked the old one. So, we ended up going back. And I mean, it was this, yeah, it was like croton and begonias and some hart's tongue fern. And it just was this lush. It just looked really beautiful. And um, so, yeah, I will say that there's some clients like to like change their colors by season. So, which is fun. Like they like maybe tropicals in the summer, so they like those kind of hotter colors. And then in the winter, they are like really like kind of the cool colors. And so then we'll go into these lavenders and whites in the fall that people don't typically think about, but as fall colors, but can be really lovely and stunning, especially when you start playing with foliage and stuff. So so clients do take that a little bit as far as, if they're tired of a color or like color, but most of them just, we're fortunate. They trust us.
Do you have any sites that are really tricky in terms of like a rooftop or like a balcony that is more challenging to get materials to and from?
Yes. Less so now because again, I'm really fortunate. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, so I can say yes to things that I want to say yes to, and I'm in a position where I can say no because we have plenty of business. Um, so some of our most challenging sites are houseboats.
Oh,
And we used to be the houseboat container guy. Like we did one well, and then word got out, and then all of a sudden we were doing like 5 houseboats. I mean, it's just like we no longer do houseboats. And it's kind of the same with rooftops. So more just because of cost and efficiencies. And my crew was just saying it's exhausting. I have a lot of the women that I work with, we're an all women business, and it just worked out that way, but they're just incredible women in horticulture. Um, and some of us are aging, and it was just like, wow, that's, it's getting really physical. And so the houseboat piece and the lack of parking and the amount of hauling that had to happen. Again, we put systems in place to do that. Like we staggered people's arrivals. And I mean, we had to think about all these things and different equipment to trolley the plants to the decks. But it just got to be where it just got so costly for us to do. And the market was kind of, the clients were kind of saying, wait, this is getting really expensive, that it was just something that we felt like, okay, we could walk away from because we were getting some pushback on it. And but it was just the cost was what the cost was. And it's this kind of the same with rooftops and freight elevators and having to tarp everything. We're we're very diligent about how we treat a client's home. And so we tarp every surface, exterior or interior. But so when we're going up these elevators and then having to tarp and tape, all the pathway to getting to the patio or getting to the rooftop garden. And you can only fit so much material in the freight elevator at a time with the tools. And it just, again, became some of those jobs that we're much less likely to take on. So we do have a few clients still with rooftop gardens, but I'm doing less and less of those. They're just really challenging. And then there's a liability piece too. You don't want to be walking. I mean, there's this piece that you have to think about, like, okay, fertilizer, Miracle-Gro puts, or Jax or whoever you're using for your water soluble fertilizer, puts blue dye in it. And you're walking through, if the source is here and the source, and you're walking through with this material through this white carpet or even soil for that matter. You just, you don't want to have to be replacing somebody's carpet or their furniture. So we've just gotten to where when I'm meeting with a new client, I kind of look around and I go, what's the parking like? Do we have to be accessing the inside of the house? Because that's another thing, that the client has to be home typically. How many stairs are we having to go up and down? And is the client going to be okay if we're having to go up and down these stairs, paying for all that labor? And if not, then we have to have all these extra tools on all these different tiers so that we're not going up and down. And what does that look like? And so there's a lot of kind of looking at, again, the costs of doing business and whether the client is willing to pay for that time, because it really comes down to time and materials.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's not a clean process by any means. So having to go through someone's house just sounds very, I would have immense anxiety, like worried that I would be like, I'd trip and I'd throw a pot of plants all over their living room. Like, you never know.
Right, and booties on your feet when you go through, and all these things that, again, these supplies and time that you have to think about. And the customer at times is looking at paying for the end product, not necessarily looking at the time that it takes you to do that. And with container gardening, that can be tricky because container gardening can take a lot of time. There's a lot of touches. And so again, we're fortunate that we have a client base that appreciates that, but you really want to make sure that what you're providing meshes with, what your client's willing to pay for.
Yeah. So as you mentioned that you do installations, I'm assuming pot procurement is oftentimes part of that initially,
Yep.
and then ongoing refreshes and maintenance. And then you also mentioned, we talked a little bit before we hit record about the additional pieces that you're adding on to your business, doing more teaching and speaking, both for clients and for fellow designers. I'd love to have you tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'd love to share. So yeah, so recently, and it's kind of these, like, as a designer and as an entrepreneur and a horticulturist, we go through these seasons, right? And like I was saying, like I was a container gardener and then I got into education, which I really loved. And then the container gardening business just grew. But now I'm in this new season of where as a container gardening company, I feel like I want to have like more reach and more impact in the industry. The industry right now is really thriving. Container gardening is thriving for a number of reasons, but where it used to be kind of the redheaded stepchild of the industry, didn't seem to be profitable. People kind of looked on container gardeners as, oh, it's, just a mom wanting to go back to work or something of that nature. That's shifted a lot. It's a profitable part of the business, the industry. And with urban gardening, it's a really important piece of the industry. And so I was just feeling like I wanted to be part of that growth and impact. And so I'm doing, yeah, I'm giving workshops, presentations. We're in the process of creating some online courses, both, as you mentioned, for the home gardener. And that's more about just how to how to container garden like a professional, right? It's like tips and tricks and shortcuts, all these little things that we've learned along the way. And then there's this other piece that I'm pretty excited about that's for the budding container gardener business or somebody new to the industry. And because so many of us come in at it from either like this sense of artistry or design, or we love plants, it's this passion of ours, but then we realize that we can make money at it. It becomes kind of like a hobby mixed with it, like a job. I call it a jobby. It's not a hobby, but it's not really a job that it's not a profession that you could maybe support a family on. That's kind of how it's approached, but that doesn't need to be the case. And so by creating systems and looking at numbers and designing efficiently, container gardening can be a really profitable part of your business or just the only piece of your business. And so I'm fiddling around creating a course for that person that just is there, that's running their business, maybe like, thinking about it or 1 to 5 years in and wanting to know, how do I get it to the next level? And that's different for each person too, because we all are unique people and we run unique businesses. And so my business model of having employees and running, multiple jobs on a day might look really different from a person that's just a one sole proprietor, but both can be profitable. So, yeah.
How many employees do you have right now?
Right now I have 7.
Oh, that's
So,
a lot.
but that's during the season, and then it drops down to 3 throughout the year that continue through maintenance. I'm again very fortunate in the fact that a few of my employees have gone on to launch their own businesses and are amazing designers and professionals, but they still come back to work with me once or twice a week. So that's where I kind of alluded to this weird employee system I have, is that I have found that if I have good people that I don't have to retrain, it's really helpful for my business. And so instead of setting an employee's schedule, let the employees tell me when they're available. And we schedule all of our jobs around the various employees' schedules, which can be a lot. But it's allowed me to maintain employees for many, many, many years. They're invested in the business and the clients as much as I am, honestly. And it's just worked. So yeah, so they'll submit like, oh, hey, and a lot of them work part-time or mothers that have their kids that have to pick up, they have to pick up for school, and they'll just kind of send me their list. And then I look at our clients and go, okay, so on Monday, I have 5 people available. So we're going to run all the big jobs on on Mondays, because I know I have 5 people available, or that's the Mondays are going to be the jobs where we run 2 jobs or 2 different crews all day long. And then I'll be like, Tuesdays, I only have 2 people available. So that's when we're going to just do the front entry jobs and the smaller clients. And so, yeah, so that's how the scheduling works from season to season.
That sounds like a crazy Excel spreadsheet.
It is a crazy Excel spreadsheet, but I don't mind spreadsheets. I mean, I'm a designer at heart, but there's this business aspect of it. And it's problem solving. I like kind of figuring it out. So, and again, it's so beneficial for me to be able to have these people that they're like family, and that I just feel blessed that some of them just come back like, I only can give you 1 day now, Cindy. I'm like, I'll take it. I'll take it. And
Yeah.
I know exactly what jobs to put them on because they've been with me for so long. And yeah.
Well, and the longer you have someone, like I joke about Colleen that works with me that she speaks Chrissy fluently because we've worked together for so long that there's so many things that I can communicate in shorthand or sometimes not even communicate at all, and she just knows. Where with new employees, especially with an industry that typically has a lot of high turnover, like you never really build that. So having people and having that tenure is so valuable.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, they know me better than I know myself sometimes. Like yeah, they'll come up and go, you look like you're hungry. I'm like, I'm not hungry. Oh, you look like you need some food. We see the glaze over the eyes or something. I don't
Yeah.
know. They're fantastic people and do a good job of taking care of me and understanding me. And I hope I do the same for them.
Yeah.
So
I noticed that with my contractors too. Like there's some and I'll hop onto a job site and I'll overhear their conversation. They're like, I don't think Chrissy's gonna like that. And then I'll walk up and I'll be like, what? And they're like, we're not gonna tell you. You just have to see. And I'm like, is it that? And they're like, see, I told you. Like, all right. It's nice and it makes things more efficient and it also like it brings a lot of joy being able to work with the same people and you get to know people so well and their families and like you said, they kind of become family. So it's
absolutely.
nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking of spreadsheets and business, what is your favorite part about being a business owner?
Hmm. I love the challenge of it, honestly. I mean, it's just I'm always learning something new. Um, I love again the flexibility that it offers. Honestly, I like the money. I mean, I hate to say it, I like to make money. So I'm not going to be shy about that. I enjoy that. I think for me as well, I enjoy the mentorship piece of it. I love the fact that I have these employees that are going out and, running their own businesses and making relationships with their own clients and creating these really beautiful arrangements and combinations. And that I really enjoy. And I like being part of an industry. And not that you're not when you're not a business owner, because you still are, you're always part of the industry. But I like having control of kind of making the decisions, both for my company and its growth, but also maybe that are helpful for the industry. And yeah, and having conversations with other business owners and those in the industry that can move that needle forward in whatever way, whether it's sustainability or again with the container gardening piece, I think just moving it to a place where it's recognized by industry as being a professional, viable business. So yeah, I think those, I mean, I like it all.
Well, and I think it's you've got an amazing eye and talent, like your creativity and that is it's really inspiring. And I think that having the ability of having someone with that artistry really bringing a more visibility to that specific niche of the industry, like really helps kind of bring that up to another level instead of, like it is something that typically has been thought of as something that, oh, the homeowner will just do that. They'll go to Home Depot and grab whatever Home Depot thinks they should get. And it's so much different. There's so much creativity and artistry in what you do. And it really raises the bar, I think, for all of us to see those things happening and see that inspiration. So I think
Oh,
it's
thank you.
fantastic.
That means a lot. Yeah, I know. I think those days, I'm hoping those days of just going to Home Depot or Costco and just popping in, the annuals that are available are going by the wayside. Container gardening just offers such an incredible way to um, show your own artistry. And I kind of believe everybody has that within them. And tie into themes and colors in a way that's more manageable than in the landscape and bring those things that you love closer to you. And so, yeah, so I like the idea and I hope that it continues of people kind of creating these unique and interesting plant combinations that are more reflective of themselves and and throwing edibles in their container gardens with an evergreen, and just making these things that really speak to themselves. I mean, if you think about it, as humans, we kind of do that seasonally. We change things up, through celebrations and foods and colors. And so container gardening is just an extension of that. So yeah, I hope that yeah, that would be my hope, is that like homeowners and professionals alike just go out and create these plantings and combinations, of course, that have to culturally work. I mean, shade loving plants need
Yeah.
to be shade, and there's those things too, but that appeal to them is that when they look out, they're like, oh, it's just so joyful. Like I created this, and it makes me happy.
But there are a lot of traditional gardening rules and like landscape design rules that you can break when you're working in a container garden. And it's
Absolutely.
nice to be able to kind of do things that you wouldn't normally. And you can push the limits on plant material because it doesn't need to be there year
Right.
after year, season after season. It only has to last for a short window potentially.
Right. And, the other piece of it is, if it does like if it's a really cool evergreen or even a perennial, or something that you wanted to trial that was exciting, and then it does work, even after it outgrows the planting, then you can move it into the landscape. And I kind of like that feature of it too, because you can buy it whatever it is. I mean, I think of like Isley, right? Like Isley has
Mhm.
these really cool evergreens and conifers and stuff. Some of them would be really expensive and challenging for me to afford, but they also sell in small quarts sometimes, or small gallons. And I can put that into a container and grow it on for a couple years, and then move it into the garden for a much lesser expense. And I've enjoyed it the whole time. So,
That actually brings up an interesting piece. So since you don't do you don't touch the landscape, what do you do with all of that plant material that has outgrown its spot in the containers?
So if something's outgrown the container, we always offer it up to the client first, right? The client, and say, hey, do you have a place in your landscape that you'd like to have this for? Because they've paid for it. And sometimes they do, sometimes they're like, no, like, do you have a friend that you want to donate it to? Do you want to give it to? So that's always kind of our first route. If not, then it kind of waffles. I'll maybe offer it up to the crew and offer the client a discount, like for, giving it back basically. Or sometimes we work with retirement centers. At the end of a season, I'll just donate plant material if we have some leftover plant material. I've done that with the Arboretum sometimes. So, um, the worst case scenario is nobody wants it and then we compost it. That typically doesn't happen with perennials or evergreens. That would be your annuals. And we do end up composting annuals, but they're at the end of their life cycle anyways.
Right.
So yeah.
Do you have the random reject garden like I do of things that you can't let go of that end up finding a home in the last square inch of corner garden space?
Absolutely. Yeah. I always always tell people like, oh, you must have a beautiful garden. And I'm like, oh, I mean, it's interesting. Like I just, it's every interesting plant that I just could not let go of. And I've tried to find a space in my own garden or my own containers. But yeah, I think that's the nature of being a plant lover, right? It's just
Yeah.
really hard to let go of some things. It's the same with going to a nursery. I mean, I feel like it's super important to have a plan when you're going to a nursery and when you're shopping for containers. And I preach that left and right. However, I am also probably one of the first to get there and get distracted by the newest, coolest, prettiest thing. It's like, oh, I gotta have this. So
Yeah. You
you
wouldn't
gotta
be
be
a true plant
kind with
lover
yourself.
if you didn't do that.
Yeah, you gotta be kind with yourself and just go, okay, it's who you are.
Yeah. It's getting it home and actually doing something with it and instead of just having it sit there. Like I am notorious for, I'll set the plant right next to my pot and not actually put it in. Like, oh,
Yeah.
it's like rooting out of the bottom of the pot because I just shoved it in there. I need to actually do something with that.
Well, that's where you need containers, see, because with having all these containers around, and mine are that's a whole nother system. That's actually another system to talk about at some point. But I have a lot of plastic, high-end polyethylene plastic containers in all different sizes because I like to use them when I'm buying planters for clients. to mock them up. It's not going to be the style or the color, but they get at least an idea of scale, because it's really hard
Mm.
to kind of convey that to clients sometimes. But anyways, I have a bunch here. And so when I'm not using them for mocking things up, then I just plant them with all of the things that I'm holding over. So they have a little bit more room and time to grow versus the black nursery pot that they've come in. Gives me another year or two to have to plant them into the garden.
Yeah, I like that. That's fun. So as we wrap up, I've got a couple last questions. What is the best advice that you've ever received?
Mm. I think the best advice, and I think this might have come from Tina Dixon, was saying no it can be saying yes to yourself. I tend to want to do everything for everyone. And if I go meet with a client, it's very hard, a potential client, it's really hard for me not to take on that business, even though I shouldn't be, because, my crew's pulled too thin and it just doesn't make sense. So I think that's good, is sometimes I feel like saying no is just like closing a door on something, where saying no is actually saying yes to some other things that are usually typically about for myself, both personal and maybe just growth somewhere else within the business. So that might be the best piece. Another great piece of advice, there's been a couple, I mean, there's been, nuggets all throughout my time in horticulture, but is joining a professional organization like APLD, or, Digging In Gathering is a national container gardening organization that a lot of people are not aware of. And it's a great place for container gardeners to go. It's a community of businesses that are only focused on container gardening. And but then you're surrounding yourself with other people that might be more seasoned than you, that have a different outlook than you, run their businesses a little different, but there's this commonality of what you're looking for and what you're doing. And so it's just a support, it's another layer of support, I think, that's super helpful, and professional development. And then I guess the third thing, if I was to really think about it, is when I was at Lake Washington many, many years ago, taking classes, not as an instructor, was to go work in a nursery. And I know not everybody has the ability to do that, or it might not make sense, but as a designer, and being in horticulture, if you can work at a nursery, you are honing all those skills. I mean, you are surrounded by plants. You're having to answer questions regarding plants and their culture and their growth and their habits, and all the time. So you really get familiar with plants. And then also it tests your design skills, because customers are coming in all the time saying, with their little photograph, or now it's a phone, saying, I've got this container and what should I do here? Or I've got this spot in my yard that's under a cedar and I can't, so you're kind of on the fly having to practice all these skills that you will use in your business.
And you don't have the time to think about it because you got to answer the question and just have that knowledge, tip of
Yeah,
your tongue.
it's like taking a quiz every day.
Yeah. That you don't have the notes to prepare for either.
No. And you learn how to deal with people
Yeah.
too, which, when you are in a business, and whether you are on a crew or you're running the container gardening business, you are coming in contact with those clients, and you need to be able to know how to interact with people in a professional way. And people of all different cultures, all different ages, all different demographics. So that's also good experience, just dealing with people.
Yep. So what is some of the worst advice you've ever received?
I don't, I guess I'm super fortunate. I don't feel like anybody's ever given me any really horrible, terrible advice. Or maybe if they have, I just ignored it. I
Good for
don't
you.
feel, yeah, I don't feel like I've received any. I just feel like along the way, I've just gleaned so much from so many different people. I will say, again, going back to that, like, everybody's unique, and we're unique people. We have unique businesses. And so And maybe that's my approach, is that maybe I've received some advice and I'm just like, well, that's not really going to work for me. That's not how I run my business. And I think that probably the first thing that would come to mind for me is in container gardening pricing. A lot of container gardeners price by inch. So they will
Hmm.
take a 20-inch pot or 21-inch pot, and they'll say 20-inch pot's going to be $10 per inch. And that's how they price. And it works for a lot of people. And I'm talking kind of nationwide. This is a pricing strategy. And, I've looked at it and I'm like, that would never work for me. That's like horrible advice for me because so many things come up when we're on site. Maybe a plant has failed since we've been there. Now I'm having to replace it that I didn't think I was going to have to replace. Maybe it's especially with new business, like maybe we come on site. I don't know what's at the bottom of that pot. I mean, is it styrofoam? Is it rocks that have to be lugged out and taken to the dump? Are there even like, we've gone on site to like containers that are 42 inches wide. We have no idea if they have drainage holes or not in them, so I could never wrap my head around like giving a price per inch, because there's so many unexpected things that we come up against when we're container gardening. But for some, especially if you're changing out 4 seasons a year, it's just different. But it's not horrible advice. It works for some people. It wouldn't work for me.
Well, I think that that's really it's a talent, and it's very wise to be able to take advice, take ideas, and filter that to what's feasible and what works the best for you and your business. Because
Yeah,
not everyone, I mean, even just how your mind works and how you want to bill and what feels best for you, and how you want to be able to order things, and that is all going to be different, case by case
absolutely.
basis.
And I think that's one of the first things when you're starting out a business is just kind of coming to terms with that, is that I'm unique. It needs to reflect what I want. I don't want to be having employees. I don't want a crew. I don't want the management. That's fine, right? That's a good decision, but that's just knowing where you're at.
Yeah.
Where somebody else is like, no, I want to grow. I want to have employees. I want to be, you know, so it's different.
So speaking of that, do you have any other advice for new entrepreneurs or emerging designers that you think would be something that you would say, cast a wide net, that you would want to tell all of those people?
I mean, I guess my bias, is if you can, y- you know, sh surround yourself with somebody that knows more than you, that's better at something, whether it's the design piece, whether it's the financial piece, maybe it's all the pieces. Um, and, try to collaborate with them or try to shadow them or whatever it is. But if you can learn on somebody else's dime, if you can make mistakes on somebody else's dime, um, that's a great thing, right? I've learned a lot of things the hard way. And I still actually I worked with Tina for years and I learned so much. But glean as much as you can. Don't try to do it alone. Um, I think joining a professional organization again, I think that would be one of my, first little tidbits as far as like get involved in, whatever piece of the industry that you want to be in, and surround yourself with people that are doing the same thing, and be part of those chat groups and forums and go to those, events and members. Just take advantage of it all, soak it all in. Um, and then maybe just be patient and kind with yourself. Again, it's because we are all unique. And like, I think a lot of us get into thinking we want to run our own business. And then it takes off, right? It eventually takes off because we're good at what we do, and we're the experts. And then you kind of hit this pain point, and it either like flattens out or it actually dives, right? A little bit. And you're like, I don't want to be doing this anymore. Like I'm working too hard, or it's not, I'm doing this and I really just want to design. I would say be patient, because that's a great place to be, because growth is not this like total straight line that's upward going. It is this curve, and the pain points allow you to like look back at your business and reflect, What is it that I want to do? How can I change? What systems can I allow? Again, the system thing. Oh, what systems can I put in place that are going to help me get back to that growth? Right. And so, yeah, I think that's key. I think a lot of us, especially in those years 1 to 5, hit a pain point and go, oh, this isn't either what I thought it was going to be, or this isn't doing what this isn't doing what I thought it was going to be. I didn't make money as fast. And just be patient because it's not a straight trajectory.
Well, and it's hard sometimes when you're so like super focused on what you're doing in the task at hand to step back and like think, am I still going in the direction that I want to? Like, am I working towards my, 5, 10 year grand vision, or have I kind of gotten distracted and kind of gone off the path in a different direction? Like that might be part of the pain point, is that you've
Right.
kind of veered a little bit sideways.
Absolutely. And because you took this, like you did get off your path and took this different direction, isn't necessarily bad. Like it's an exploration. So then it's this place where you can kind of go, okay, what did I gain from that? And how do I get back onto the path that I wanted to be on? Or do I change my path?
Okay, rooftop gardens. Okay, that's not what I want to be doing. Let's like,
Ex
circle back, into the path where I really want to be headed.
exactly. And it's hard sometimes. Like there's some really cool rooftop projects. And I'm like, oh, and then I'm like, we hate those.
Yeah. It's hard. I have the same thing. I have such a hard time saying no sometimes because I want to do all the things, but I really strongly believe, as you said, that everything that you say no to, or everyone that says no to me, like it's opening up a bigger, better opportunity that's going to be a better fit. And you don't see it at the time. You just have to have faith that it's there.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, you bring up a good point. Like people saying no to you too, right? Like as a new business, like you put out a bid and then somebody says no, like it's too expensive or no, whatever it is that you put out, somebody says no, I'm moving on with somebody else, and yeah, that's an opportunity, right? I take it as a blessing. Like that was not a good fit for whatever reason. I was not a good fit with that person, so thank goodness. And also, when you're like thinking about pricing, is like okay, well, take it as information. It doesn't necessarily mean you're priced too high. It means that maybe that client is not the type of client you're looking for, or maybe you are priced too high, but it's something again to just take as information and work into your business strategy or model.
Wonderful. Well, before we wrap up, do you have any questions for me?
I do, and actually, I like have yeah, I have a bunch. I don't know how much time we have. So I want to know, like, when you, as a designer, because you're designing more of a global project than I am, how do you think about containers or integrate or incorporate them in your design plan?
So I incorporate containers in a lot of different ways. I do a lot of containers for people that want to do like some vegetable gardening, but they don't have either a space in their garden for it. So it's a nice opportunity to put like little things, like even in my own containers at home. I've got like rosemary and chives and some things that I just quickly pull from in the kitchen. So that's a really great opportunity that I use for people, especially if they've got like a deck outside of their kitchen and getting down to their garden is a little bit longer trek.
Mhm.
I also do a lot of containers for like focal pieces. I love using containers for water features as well, a little bubbling pot. And I like using them to create a little bit different dynamic between the softscape and the hardscape on a patio, and kind of accent corners and create a space where you can kind of, like I mentioned before, you can break some of those rules and bring in some color and some change that you could do in the landscape, but that's much more intrusive, much more cost prohibitive to, do seasonal change outs. It's not Disneyland. You don't have a gardener, changing out annuals all the time. So having those opportunities to do that, and it also, because I have some control issues, I like to have
Don't we
some
all?
structure that gives me an opportunity to allow homeowners to do some playing around with the garden without touching the landscape that I've designed. But even then, like, I'm still like, oh, this is what you should have as like your main focal piece, your evergreen element. And these colors would look really great. So I still like interject my own ideas into it. But it's something that I think brings a really nice dynamic. I've got a garden that I designed a couple years ago in Mercer Island that has these pots that I was looking for another client, and I saw these pots and I was like, these would look amazing. So I called her and I was like, I'm sending you a picture of these pots that I just really think would look amazing for your garden. And she's like, I love them, get them. And so it's just, it created this whole nother dynamic in her space. And so I think it's a really great opportunity.
Well, I asked because following you on Instagram and seeing some of the visual, like the planters that I've seen that you've done, the planters themselves are gorgeous. And so, yeah, and so that's interesting. Like you were out and about and you actually saw planters and you were just happening to work on this project at the same time. And it's like, this is it, right?
Yeah.
Because I think choosing a planter is one of probably the most challenging parts sometimes of container gardening.
See, and
But
I
you
have a
do a
harder
really
time
good
with the
job of it.
plants.
Oh, really? See, okay,
Yeah.
but you do a really good job of it. Like I see what you do. I'm like, wow, she really nailed that. Like the scale, the size, the style, the color with the surrounding
Yeah.
pieces that you're talking about.
I think of the pots in like designing a hardscape element. So like the scale and the size and the texture and the color, especially, like that incorporates in my mind really easily with the hardscape design and vision. It's
Mhm.
the plants for it that I have a hard time with, because I can't always find the same things that I have visualized. And sometimes it's like, oh, I found this really great hot pink, begonia last year, and I can't find that one. I can find orange and I can find red, but that hot pink isn't available like, I had pictured in my head. So sometimes I have a hard time with the plants for it. And because they are so temporary, it really challenges my mind a little bit with the plants.
Yeah. It is interesting, like especially with the annuals, like you mentioned, like it's like, I don't know, it's like lipstick
Yeah.
or, it's like nail polish. They go in the colors and they come in and out of style so quickly and by different names. And so, yeah, you have to kind of really be on top of, what's out there and yeah, and the colors can vary, just like that pink can now be like a pink violet or a pink orange,
Mhm.
which can read really differently in the landscape. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So you kind of touched on how you go about finding the planters. Um, is your, I guess, in your design method is different for the planters than the full landscape. I mean, you approach it differently in the fact that I like the fact that you see it as like giving up a little bit of control to your client. I had never heard that before, and I think that's actually really intriguing. I love it though.
Well, because I have a few clients that most of my clients are not avid gardeners. They typically, someone that's an avid gardener that loves plants is not going to hire a landscape designer. That's not always the case. But for the most part, they're like, I don't know anything about plants. I have a brown thumb. I don't even know the difference between a rhodie and a hydrangea. And so they just say, you do what you like. These are the colors I like. They'll look at pictures, say, I like that. I don't like that. But then occasionally I do get people that are avid gardeners or love plants. And it's challenging for me to design that, knowing that they're going to interject their own things. And I like to kind of give them some direction, but I've got one client that she is lovely. I love her to death, but she's planted some really thuggish plants in a beautiful, very simple, clean garden space. And it's really challenging because I go and I want to get updated pictures and see how things are going. And then there's this bishop's weed that's like taking over space. And I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have done that. And so I think the container plantings gives an opportunity for some of those gardeners that, especially I have a couple clients that are aging and love gardening and love plants, but don't have the opportunity, and elevating that space and giving them that opportunity is a nice way to give them a space where they can still do what they love without having to, worry about how they're going to roll themselves off the pavement to get up out of the garden.
Right. No, absolutely. I love that. Little trick for them too is if with the container garden, we use buckets. We use 5 gallon buckets with a seat on it. Like you can buy a bucket lid, it's called, and you can throw all your tools in it. But literally you can, I mean, my whole crew, the whole crew has them. We actually work seated, mostly because it's less torque on our backs and ergonomically it's better for our bodies. And so we're at this position where we're seated and we're just working at the containers, which I think would be good for some elderly clients probably
I
as
think I need one of those.
yeah, I'll send you a link that's like, look,
Okay.
you get your bucket and you get your lid and you get your caddy and you're like all set up. You're like, then you're container gardening like a professional.
Nice.
What vendors, where do you get your planters typically? Or is it kind of all over? I mean, do you have a vendor
It's
you like?
it's all over the place. I really like Potteryland. I really miss Awe Pottery.
Oh,
I
me
was
too.
just heartbroken when they decided to shut down. But the owner of Potteryland is just he's lovely. And I really enjoy working with them, and I have really good luck finding things there because they carry a wide array of different things.
Mhm,
There's a few other pottery places I've gotten stuff from. I don't do a lot of pottery, honestly.
mhm.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like over the last year or so I've done more, um, just because it's one of those things that ends up getting cut from the landscape budget a lot, and they end up doing it later. But I've started to see some clients that cut that initially that are now ready to start bringing those things in. So I have seen a little bit of a flux.
Yeah, I'd like to see more. I think it kind of went by the wayside with a lot of the kind of fiber cement and fiberglass materials. And I'd like to see some of that high-end glazed ceramic kind of come back into style. Just from a sustainability standpoint, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, they can be real long lasting and they're beautiful and they're artistic and unique.
Yeah. Where do you get most of your pottery?
It's really morphed over the years because I mean, I used to get a fair amount from I get some from Potteryland, Campania, but I have to make it's got to be a pretty big project to be able to, make that worthwhile for the client, like a lot of pots. I get some of the fiber, glass is coming, I get from J. Scott's, which I really like when it comes to that material. That material can be a little all over the place right now. There's high quality and lower quality. I think you have to be really careful with that when you're purchasing fiber cement or fiberglass. Um, C3, I haven't used them, but every time, I mean, I planted in the APLD display, and anytime I'm around them, I love those planters, so I'd love an opportunity to use them. I used to get things from Molbacks on occasion, Rock Mountain, kind of all over. It's the same thing. I mean, the process is usually kind of have in mind what I'm looking for scale wise,
Yeah.
size wise, and then it's just, just doing the research and finding it. Yeah.
There's I'm drawing a blank on it. I'm actually trying to bring it up right now. There's a company out of Canada. It's not C3 that I've used a couple times. They do all steel planters.
Mm,
Um I'll have to find it and I'll send it to you. But
yeah, please
I've
do.
done a couple really big, large scale planters with them that have been really fun. And
Oh,
they have some off the shelf sizes, but they do custom sizes and custom powder coats and that. I've done a couple projects with large, instead of doing like a built-in raised planter for like a vegetable garden, I've done big steel planters, like 6 feet by 3 feet.
oh yeah,
Um,
definitely send me that link. I'd be really
um,
interested in.
it's green something. I'll find it.
Okay.
But yeah, that's been one that has been really fun to use. It really, I think the hard thing was all going out of business. It really, I think a lot of local companies have kind of taken up some of that, but it's not the same.
It's not the same. No,
Yeah.
yeah. They had such strong relationships, over in Asia and yeah, just we're getting some really great planters. So,
Well, and I've found like I had one project, gosh, it's probably been 3 or 4 years ago, that I got 3 planters for this like strip between their new parking space and their front walkway in this really cool kind of bluish green color. And then they I had some pottery in the back and on their front porch. and that got cut from the budget, and then they wanted to add it back in later, and they wanted those same pots, and I couldn't get them again. And with awe, a lot of times I feel like I could go to them and be like, "Hey, I bought these. Here's a picture." And they would be able to somehow magically source that same pottery again. Where
Yes.
a lot of other resources, they're like, we just get what we get. And so thankfully, Potteryland, he called me and he's like, "Hey, I have two that just randomly showed up because he knew I was looking for them. And it
Oh,
worked
that's
out
great.
great.
Yeah.
And he was able to get a couple others, different sizes in that same color. But that's been really hard, if you find something that you love and then you can't get it again because it fluxes so much.
Yeah, no, yeah, we run into that as well. It's where, a client has bought planters or, 6, 8 years ago and now ready, like basically did a redesign of their landscape and is incorporating more planters. And then we can't find that color or glaze or whatnot. And yeah, it can be a
Yeah.
struggle.
I still don't see that. Um,
I have one more question for you while you're looking. So
yes.
I'm curious because I know you've been working on this book. And I'm curious as to how you are building time in to still work on that as the season, as our spring season is starting to gear up. And I know clients start contacting you and you're having more meetings and um, does that just get pushed to the back burner or have you created some type of system to allow you to kind of continue to progress on it, even if it's a slightly slower pace?
Um, yes and no. It's an ongoing challenge, especially with kids' sports. Between my two kids, we've got four select sports, which is a lot.
You're in it.
um, we just finished basketball season. Baseball season is already in full swing. Volleyball season is still ongoing. But I have I don't know that I would necessarily call her a business coach, but that's kind of sort of her role that she plays with me. Um, we we meet on a semi-regular basis, and she's really the one that pushed me to put the book on the forefront because when I first talked to her about it, because I reached out to her for various different reasons, and she's like, "There's something to this. Like you should not just dangle this off on the wayside. Like you should really start putting forth some effort into this." And so she really pushed me towards it, and she has a deadline for me each month to send her a chapter.
Okay.
And so that's really the driving factor keeping me working on it. I mean, it's at this point it's still like every chapter I send her is just in a very chaotic state of, it's not organized. It's just like verbal vomit on a page. Just this is kind of my thoughts on the topic. And then eventually I'll go back and organize and edit and clip and add. But it's making progress. I do try and I'm pretty strict with my schedule for like my rest of my design business where I have Mondays and Fridays are usually my office day. And
Mhm.
then Tuesdays and Thursdays are my consult days, and Wednesday is usually a floater day, so that I've got 3 days where I schedule meetings, 2 days that are dedicated to be in the office, or if I need to hop out to a job site, I can. Um, I do end up trying to block time for writing and working on the podcast and things like that within that Monday and Friday time period. When things get busy, that's easier said than done.
Right.
But that's kind of how I try and build that time in. It's an ever going. I don't know that balance is really necessarily a great word for it because I find that it's not the teeter totter. You have to like shift from one piece to the other. So you're hopping from stepping stone to stepping stone. It's like, okay, hopping to family time right now, everything else is gone. Hopping to writing the book, working on a podcast episode, everything else needs to turn off. And then hopping into, preparing for a client meeting, doing a presentation, site visits, things like that. And I find that compartmentalizing my time that way helps me to focus and be more efficient in all aspects.
Yeah, I love that kind of visual of like it's like a stepping stone because I agree. Yeah, it's balance is such a funny word that we all kind of throw out there, and I think it's really hard to be balanced if you're trying to do everything at once. And no, I love that visual of that.
When I picture like balance gives me this picture of like having one foot on either side of the teeter totter, and you're constantly
Mhm.
like trying to do this, and you only find that balance point in transition.
Yeah,
And I feel like that transition is, for me, it's not a balance point. It's a stepping off point, and
yeah,
it's, closing the door to my office and walking out into the living room. It's not, that's not where my balance is. My balance is in making sure that I'm able to be in all of those places when I need to be.
right. I agree. I think that's key. Being present in the places that you need to be. Super cool.
Well,
I can't wait to
wonderful.
read it. I can't wait to read the book.
Well, hopefully I can keep making progress, and as spring kicks into high gear, it'll be harder and harder to find the time. But I'm hoping my first draft should, if I stay on target, should be done by my birthday in August. So,
Oh, wow,
um,
that's soon.
well, it'll take a long time from there.
Right.
I think that's the easiest part in the whole thing, is just getting the ideas down, then the hard work of editing and clipping and changing, and then the production. Like I don't even have all the answers of all of that yet, but
But you'll
it'll
get
come.
there. Yeah. And in the meantime, we all get to listen to your podcast, which is so amazing. And every time I listen to it, I learn something from either you or somebody that you're interviewing. Yeah, it's a really great thing that you've created. And I don't know what your initial goal was with it, but the reach that you have and the knowledge that you're sharing, again, that's kind of moving the industry forward, um, is amazing.
Well, thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty
I
cool.
don't know that I really had a very concrete idea, because I normally plan things out very diligently and do my research, and it was kind of one of those on a whim things that I did, which is not in character. Um, and I wanted to create something that was what I was looking for.
Mm,
And I feel like there's a really big gap in the industry of knowledge and opportunity to learn about what it is to run a business. And I feel like it's a step that I would have made much sooner had I had the safety net of the information available. And once I made that step, I got hit in the face with a ton of bricks that, I already knew so much more than I thought I did. I just didn't realize it,
mhm,
because I was absorbing so much from all of my mentors, all of the different companies that I had worked for, even just things that I learned in school that you learn it in one ear and out the other, and then later you're like, oh yeah, I remember that.
right.
So things like that come up that, I think I love giving back to the industry, and I think it's really important to kind of put that information out there. And I love teaching and sharing, and the opportunity to speak to different groups, and do the webinars and things that I've started doing. I really enjoy it. It's really more of a passion project. And I mean, I won't ever, well, never say never, but I can't imagine ever giving up design. But I'm really enjoying this part of it. So it's fun.
It shows, and you're when you are educating and then yet you have that passion too, um, it just really resonates with people. I mean, going back to like Don Marshall or Tina Dixon or any of those people, right? Like, you have the passion and the knowledge, and when you pair that together, it's kind of magnetic and it's infectious. And then the people that are listening and learning, um, you know, move forward.
Well, I can't wait to hear more about the classes that you're going to be offering.
Yeah,
I'll stay
keep you
tuned.
posted.
And I'll be sure to put a link to your website and social media in the show notes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So,
Yes.
yeah,
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much.
yeah,
And I
thank you.
really appreciate it.
Yeah, I do too. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Bye. To wrap up, I want to thank you for your time. I hope the ideas discussed today have left you feeling excited and energized. As I build both my business and my life, I value the support and feedback you provide. I would love for you to reach out to me to let me know what you think, give me ideas, or just to connect. Please don't forget to subscribe and also share with a friend. Until next time, go create something wonderful.